about it.
If you were to construct the most insane out of context thing to say to a woman on a first date that she could have no way of knowing, that would be it.
It's October. It's Halloween. So, of course, we are going to do the stereotypical thing and pick a bunch of scary movies. But not the ones you're thinking of. I hadn't seen any of these prior to this arc because we're calling this arc Scary Deep Cuts, which I am by no means a horror connoisseur. I enjoy horror, but I just haven't taken a lot of time to really investigate the genre. Luckily, Richard and Thorin have seen far more horror movies than I have. So they were the ones who actually selected these films. And the films that we are watching, they span the globe. So we are going to start with Session 9 from 2001. We are then going to do a Japanese film, Cure, from 1997. And then a Korean movie, Gonjiam, Haunted Asylum, which is a movie from, 2018? And then
Yes,
Kill List
more recent.
from 2011. So there you guys go. In that sequence, we'll be doing them. That makes, you guessed it, the Session 9 episode. Wow. A film that I had, like I said, I hadn't seen any of these. I hadn't even heard of this movie. David Caruso is now, because of his television career, much more famous than he was when he filmed this movie in 2001. I'm sure you guys have all seen the memes with him and the sunglasses, right, from CSI. But this was kind of not that many known actors at the time. So, Thorin, you picked this movie, so why don't you intro it and tell us why you picked it?
Yeah, well, the thing is, even though you grouped me with Richard there, I don't consider horror like one of the genres I'm super versed in, because actually, especially when I was younger, actually when I'm older, now that I can see like some of the political influences and societal commentary within horror, I can see more to it. But when I just saw it as jump scares and people getting killed, and then it's an excuse at the movie to put your arm around the girl and go hold the hand, I thought it was actually quite a puerile genre. And I have to say, like, an example of where my mind's changed is I used to think those Hammer horror ones, because they used to play them on TV in the UK, like they were just whatever. They just seemed, because the graphics looked shit at that point in time when you watch them in the 80s. And also, obviously, like, you think if you don't realize the material, like some of the performances are incredibly over the top. If you don't know, guys, the reason Christopher Lee was perfect casting for like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings is because he always goes to fucking 11. He's always doing that in those scenes. So of course, it's totally overwrought, isn't it? So I actually wasn't a big horror fan, which is why I even suggested this particular arc, because I originally, it was started out as just horror movies that are actually scary. Not a jump scare after the cat goes out and then you go, but then the real jump scares happen. Not like just loads of blood coming out of people and gore. I actually wanted it to be things that actually get under your skin and get psychological. So then we made it into this deep cut one to not do any movies people say we're not going to do The Exorcist, etc. that we could have done. So this is one of the reasons I was thinking of this genre, was this film, because this film somehow, I've never heard anyone in my life ever mention this film in any context. In fact, I even told Monty this when we were talking the other day before we did Some of the Insight. When I actually even tried after this movie thinking, what do other people think? Because it doesn't seem to have a very high rating and no one ever fucking mentions it. Whereas to me, it's like the ultimate example of a really good slow burner. And I looked up online, like, Reddit, Session 9, probably half the threads and comments are people like, nothing happens. This is just now, isn't it? It's not for this movie. And it's like, what? And so I think this movie, like, I'm not a massive horror guy, but I have to say, I like the psychological ones. I like the ones that do get inside your head. The ones where you're getting like influenced by the atmosphere of the film and the tension builds and builds and builds and builds. And I think this film's a perfect example of it. Because one thing I love about this one is, first of all, the funny reason about the fact no one knows it is because the director made the film everyone's seen called The Machinist, the one where Christopher lost all that weight. He also made another film no one's ever seen, which is a mega film, I always say. It's a romantic comedy, which I won't spoil, has a special element that will make it quite unique. It's called Happy Accidents with Vincent D'Onofrio. That's also a banger movie, and Marissa Tomei, so that's also a little suggestion for you there. So first of all, I had already watched those films. So I was interested in this director. I came across this one, and I thought, I'm not really a big horror guy, but this looks interesting. By the way, even the David Caruso angle, obviously, like Monty says, he's someone who was born to be an actor in the 80s. Sadly for him, this is the 2000s, so no one gives people only like that as a meme. So I think this is, like I say, this is for me one of the most creepy films. I even like the way it ties in. Like, put it this way, we'll get to some of this later, but it clearly tries to like play loosely on like things like documentary elements and ideas that like one of the best things about this film is it's set up initially as it's not anything creepy. It's just a bunch of people doing their job, and it's, you know, it's kind of like stupid tensions you have in a workplace. So I think this movie, like the place it starts is so different from where it ends, and the journey is what makes this movie great. So I think this is a brilliant one where if you can stay in the car on the roller coaster, the end is where it gets really dope. That's where it all comes together. But it's a slow burn. It's definitely a slow burn.
Yeah, I mean, I had seen this movie, and you know, had pretty.
Yeah, but Richard,
I don't want to say like
you are the horror guy, so it makes sense that you've seen this. Like,
Yeah.
this is your bread and butter.
Yeah, but also it's got Peter Mullan in it, and I fucking adore him. I think Peter Mullan is one of those unbelievably underrated British actors. His performance in the Paddy Considine movie Tyrannosaur, for instance, it's a fucking masterclass. And you know, he's been one of those guys who he picks really interesting films. He always ends up in cult
he's in
movies.
Rings of Power. He's the one who plays like the father of Durin or whatever in that one. This guy's always like a character actor, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't win them all, but you know, he
you know,
yeah. But I mean, listen, he's entitled to do dog shit now if he wants to. You know, and to get the money. I wouldn't begrudge him that at all because he's been in so many good things. But anyway, yeah, like Session 9 for me, it was a movie I remembered, and I remembered it being kind of a bit. I was almost a bit ambivalent about it because it came out at a time, you know, between like 99 and 2003, there was a lot of low budget horrors being made. And the reason for that was pretty much Blair Witch. I mean, you know, it was very easy all of a sudden to get a low budget, on location horror movie made because Blair Witch made a fortune. And it was just three people
also, if you
running
think
around
about
in
it,
the
you
woods.
really, as long as you have the conceit there, they're filming themselves. You're allowed to use a Sony digital camera or whatever that they just invented, haven't they? You don't have to have necessarily a massive $1 million thing.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, it is hard to, if you did not live through this period, it is hard to overstate the success of the Blair Witch Project. When it came out in the late 90s, it was all anybody was talking about at the time. It was made
doing
for
that thing they still do now, but doesn't work. They used to go, "It's the scariest film ever. People are fainting and leaving the theater."
Is
and
it
you
real?
watch it, and you're like, you know, no, exactly. That was the worst one. It might actually be real. It's on the cinema, you fucking clap. But anyway, you know what melts are like. It's true. That was a real thing. It was like a social phenomenon for sure.
It was a social phenomenon, and people don't understand. Like, that movie was made for like $500,000. And it made $250 million. That film might actually be the like largest multiplier of any movie ever made, you know, budget to actual box office gross. It is crazy how cheap it was and then how much money it made.
Yeah, and so a lot of people had an appetite for this kind of film, and you know, the director Brad Anderson, as Duncan already said, he'd had a kind of a relatively interesting rom-com the year prior to making this, so he had kind of the carte blanche to come in and do this project. And I mean, listen, in terms of blueprint for the movie, it does have a lot of parallels with Blair Witch. You know, Blair Witch was set on location in the woods. They're running around. It's, you know, digicam. This is set in a static location, the asylum that they go to do the asbestos removal in, which was a real asylum.
Yeah, I'll talk about that.
There's some details on that, don't worry.
Yeah, okay, good. And obviously the way it's shot, as you said, there are elements in there which it's not found footage, but it does feel very documentarian, very down.
It makes you feel closer, haven't you noticed that? It makes it feel less like there's that glare, that sort of, I always think like a cinema camera, what makes it cinematic is there's almost like a wax over the screen. You're not actually in the film. This will take you right up close, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you know, obviously as well, by having a pretty good cast. I mean, obviously Peter Mullan and David Caruso. It's got a sleeper cast right now. They're all more famous now. You'll know almost everyone in it. It's mad, isn't it? Yeah, and you know, I mean, like, also what I liked about it was, you know, I don't think they were like, they told everybody quite clearly to tone it down. Like, obviously up until like maybe the last 15 minutes of the movie, but you know, people are. You know, if you've ever worked on a building site, the conversation feels very natural to like the type of shit you do on your lunch break. And it's kind of interesting because this is a movie that really is just about atmosphere. And again, that parallel with the Blair Witch. The Blair Witch is all build up. And then the last like 10, 15 minutes, it's essentially a punchline, you know, boom.
Yes.
This thing that we telegraphed right at the start of the movie. By the way, when I saw Blair Witch, some people came in like 5 minutes late and didn't understand why he was stood in the corner, right? Because that was set up. So they were like, "What the fuck's this?" Like, you know. So, yeah, get to your movies on time, guys. But yeah, anyway, I mean, you know, the way this movie is structured is it has a reveal at the end, but lots of the earlier parts, indeed, like the first 45, 50 minutes, it's just ratcheting up this atmosphere. They want it dripping in the kind of dread and foreboding. Like, you know, they're in this weird place, and obviously allegorically it's perfect because asbestos is the big, you know, boogeyman of construction. If you know, whenever you have to take asbestos, it causes lung cancer. It's particles in the air.
In our era,
Well,
people don't know. In the 90s, they took it out of all the schools and everything. Like we had like a week off school or something. Yeah, it was a
yeah,
real thing.
remember it distinctly. Yeah, I didn't get a week off. They just bought a little shitty static caravan. We had to go get our lessons in there. But anyway, you know, so there's something in the air, and it can get into you. It can seep into you. That's exactly what happens
corrupts
here in
you
this
over
haunted
time,
asylum.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It causes
so, I mean,
the disease.
You know, this is a very, very, you know, low budget, lo-fi movie that is really relies on you embracing the atmosphere, embracing the mood, and there aren't any cheap jump scares really. There aren't, you know, it's just ratcheting dread because you all the while you're watching, you're thinking, where is this gonna go? And that's where the movie really succeeds, I think, as a horror film. You know, certainly, as we'll get to, if you're not scared of demonic possession, a la The Exorcist and every other fucking Exorcist spin-off, right the way through the modern stuff like Russell Crowe, the Pope's Exorcist, and all this stuff. If you're not scared of demonic possession, this is actually different. It's a different take on that kind of thing. So it's quite a unique film in all of that, you know.
Here's the thing, I would say, like I said, it is a slow burn, but that's what I love is the structure is so unique. Because if you notice the structure of the two parallel stories, the story of this thing, which could, as Richard say, turn out to be demonic. By the way, they obviously leave it open. You can just interpret it as sort of like psychological.
Best thing about the movie.
Yeah, and they purposely leave it so that because you're seeing it from one person's POV each time, maybe that is just what happens when people snap and they got to anyway. We'll get to that at the end. What they do with the two stories, the one about the girl, which you're going to find out throughout the movie, which is drip fed to you, and then the real life humdrum, like Richard says, and what do you talk about when you're having sandwiches, when you're off thing, and what's the gossip, and what's going on with him, and petty beefs, and back and forth. They both actually keep repeating these stories with a new detail added in each extra scene, with each extra interaction that just builds up, and it's the classic way, which is a masterpiece of telling film, in my opinion, which is when you can give someone a slight tweak to a story that changes the rest of the context of what happens. So I'll give you a quick example. They even do this with characters. Like when you get introduced to the character, Hank, who's played by Josh Lucas, who you've definitely seen in a million films, you're just going to think total dickhead at the beginning, but then he grows on you a little bit. And the way they do the characters is so well done. So the way that they do, and then the third story is what happened to this main guy, Gordon, who the character Richard's talking about, the actor. That's also repeated again and again and again and again. And we'll get to some of this later, I'm sure. But if you haven't noticed, by the end, I think some people miss this. It could even be inferred that the whole film was already basically like he'd already killed all his family before those first scenes. Like that could even be, you could even infer it that way. Like where you see him in the initial one where he's sleeping in his car and he's looking out. Like remember with what we've seen psychologically happen and the fact he's still on this black site, the time aspect of that is completely off. So these three stories all unravel as they go on and all interconnect in ways that seem totally disparate initially and have no connection. But yet, as Richard says, they layer in little things like hello, Gordon, or whatever, like stuff like that. Like they put in the little detail. But what's great is because then they bring it down again and go back into the minutiae of some shit. You forget that. You go back into the everyday stuff. And so I think also Richard nailed it. This isn't a film where you're going to go, oh my God. What's going to happen instead is the dread that just seeps into the film. So like as soon as you see, when you've already watched this film and you rewatch it, the second you even see that chair in a corridor, right? This is how you know someone killed it, right? It's a fucking just a chair in a corridor. That's it. There's nothing else about it. It's just like a wheelchair. But when you even see that's iconic, mate.
Hello, Gordon.
By the way, even using things, which I also love, it's a concept people miss in the modern day, when you intentionally use old technology because it has a disturbing element about it. So like even that like sound of like a recording, like an old reel to it, that's different from playing an MP3 on your computer. It just is. That itself brings this sort of evocative images of nostalgia and a past time and a different age. That voice, by the way, they use for, you know, the different voices for all the different characters in the movie. That Simon voice is fucking, whatever sound engineer picked that voice, you killed it. That's fucking insanely iconic. Even the fucking lines of this, like, I live in the weekend. It's fucking dope. It's just dope. It's just actually dope.
Hello, Doc. Simon. You know who I am.
I can't wait to get old enough when turning on a computer and then listening to an MP3 file is going to be creepy. The equivalent of this.
Here's the sad thing, Monty. Quick sidebar. When I last came to reinstall everything on my computer, I went, like everything, Monty, I installed the WinRAR, I installed all these things here. I went, downloaded Winamp, because it really does kick the llama's ass. And finally, there's a version of Windows where man kept crashing. I had to go to VLC player. That was a sad day. That was one tear. Winamp served me for a long. I'd still be on Winamp right now. I use Notepad.txt.
I can't wait.
So, yeah.
We should just write a horror movie, the Session 9 update, where he just turns on one of those old blue the iMacs, you know, the iMacs, and just opens LimeWire and downloads the Session 9.mp3.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Also,
but except it's titled Session 9.mp3, but he's actually downloaded like some fucking virus, some Trojan. That's the scary part.
Since we always like to also do like some context about the film at the beginning, I'll also say as well, a very interesting detail I didn't know myself is the character Mike, who is the one who is discovering the potentially supernatural component and listening to the tapes, who that actor wrote this film. It's the only film he ever wrote. So I'm going to guess this was also some sort of like passion project because he's obviously the main guy in the film. It's obvious in real life he must have looked up some of these things that have happened in famous cases. And again, we'll get to what happens with the asylum, etc. Like that in itself makes it seem to me like this doesn't just feel like just an indie film. It also has an interesting vibe. Like I say, it's another film, by the way, where the cast just aged better and better with the time. Like even just the inspector guy, by the way, you will know the actor. You will know that fucking guy's called Paul Guilfoyle or whatever. Like, you know all these people. It's actually a mad film in that sense. Oh, and by the way, one last thing I'll say at the beginning is this. They do another perfect thing for horror that they don't do in some other movies. Normally, to make you identify with the characters being chewed up and killed or chased by an axe murderer, you're supposed to think they're innocent and loving. No, what's brilliant about this film is you want some of these people to get fucked up. As soon as you see that dickhead Jeff with his mullet, he's an idiot. And by the way, the second he says he has nyctophobia, fear of the dark, if you can't see where this is going, if you can't tell this motherfucker is going to end up in the dark, you haven't watched movies.
I got nyctophobia. What? Fear of the dark.
The Josh guy, obnoxious as fuck. You're supposed to sort of want him to get fucking wrecked. By the way, they obviously play with the idea for a lot of it. Maybe it was the fucking Phil guy who did that. Like, I think it's actually like, again, it's a slow burner, so a lot of people might just be out after half an hour or so. But if you can stick with it, I think this movie just gets better and better every half an hour.
I do want to start this off as the only American here about talking about the setting of this because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, go for it.
Especially because I'm from the West, but this is very much an East Coast and particularly Northeast and particularly New England thing that occurred. And honestly, particularly Massachusetts. And I've lived in Massachusetts and I actually know people who in the 1970s worked for these kind of institutions. So it was really interesting for me to see this. And the setting of this film is the Danvers State Mental Hospital, which is outside of Boston. And you may look at this and think, why is there this extremely epic, beautiful giant brick mental hospital? And it's a great question. And the funny thing about this is Danvers is not the only one, you know, in the States. It's not even the only one in Massachusetts. In fact, Massachusetts is riddled with these buildings that were old mental asylums. And most of them were shut down in the 1970s. And the reason why these things exist, and they exist particularly in the state of Massachusetts, is that Massachusetts was actually seen as being very progressive in the treatment of disabled and people with psychiatric disorders. So they were one of the first states in like the 19th century to start to build schools for disabled people in order to give them an education, because otherwise they were just kept at home during that time period. And then later on, still in the 19th century, but a little bit later on, they started to build these massive psychiatric hospitals because it was seen as a symbol of a benevolent society to take care of the mentally unstable. Now, this lasted, for over 100 years. Some of these buildings were in use. And eventually, during the 1970s, what started to happen was that there were a lot of lawsuits against these psychiatric hospitals because they were old. There was questions about patient well-being and patient abuse at these facilities. Oftentimes people were effectively institutionalized in the asylums for their entire lives. And so there was a question about whether that was good. It's like prisons for the mentally unstable. So a lot of these institutions, which housed in Massachusetts thousands of people each, sometimes were decommissioned. And some people, when I was in Massachusetts, some people in the Northeast actually think that that was a major contributor to homeless issues today, right? Which is that these people, even if the psychiatric hospitals were not optimal care a lot of the time, is it actually better to have that than to kind of chuck these people out on the streets? Because many of them just had no place to go when these things shut down.
Yeah.
And, it stopped people from receiving that care. But it was actually a point of pride in the Northeast to build these epic, beautiful institutions because it was a symbol of a caring and benevolent society. So I think for a lot of people who are either from the West like me, where this stuff doesn't exist even, in a large swath of America, or if you're not American at all, you may be wondering, like, why the fuck is there this epic building that housed for like the mentally insane? And that's the reason why. And they still exist. Many of them have been transformed into other other kind of properties. In fact, the Danvers institution was changed into apartments. So this was abandoned at the time this movie was filmed, and it was later redeveloped. So some of them were knocked down, some of them were like repurposed, because obviously the brickwork and the masonry is extraordinary on these, and many of them are like state landmarks. They're architecturally protected. So it's a really fascinating, I think, period in American history, and one that we can talk about here. And also, very crucially, Danvers is thought to be as the inspiration for Arkham in H.P. Lovecraft. So
and then
Arkham Asylum and Batman.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, Arkham Asylum came from Arkham in H.P. Lovecraft.
It's called, yeah.
Yeah, the sanatorium, and Arkham was the city that was outside of Boston. So it's a fictional city that is thought to be based off of like Danvers and the Danvers area, and then a suburb. And then you have Danvers Mental Institution, which people thought H.P. Lovecraft used as the inspiration for Arkham. Then that was taken. H.P. Lovecraft was taken and then changed into Batman, Arkham Asylum. So pretty interesting, I think. Pretty interesting.
And as you're saying, like, this is almost like a dream. If you're going to make a small budget movie, you could just have an actual real place like this available. Like, as he even says at the beginning, when the inspector guy goes, yeah, it's shaped like a bat. Like, it looks fucking amazing, just the scene alone. Like, already you've just got so much to. That's a canvas and a half, mate.
What's so crazy is I was reading about this movie.
Were all there.
Yeah, the props were all there. Like, they didn't have to do anything. Yeah. Like, everything was just in there, and they used it. Insane.
Yeah, which look, when you're making a low budget movie, I mean, it's things like this that will really set apart what you're trying to do. I mean, to be able to to go and shoot at this location and to get there, and I'm pretty sure like in a low budget movie like this, there's probably parts, maybe that part with the wheelchair isn't in originally, but you see it and you go, oh, shit, we can do something with that. Dave Caruso also said as well. I think that they got the idea for like the dude reading the case file from the fact that there were still case files in the building when they got there. So this literally just was abandoned. It was an abandoned asylum. They went and shot it. Nobody stayed there overnight. They said it was super creepy. Everyone was on edge, and that like really informed a lot of the performances. And you know, it definitely shows. I mean, look, Peter Mullan is brilliant. Dave Caruso, he'll always be the guy from NYPD Blue for me. Not so much the fucking CSI Miami, but I think he does really well in this. Even though I do strongly believe it's Peter Mullan's film.
Sure.
But yeah, it feels very authentic in the way that they are presenting themselves, and there's nothing like overwrought up until the end. There's nothing exaggerated up until the end. You know, they look like a bunch of guys on a job in a building they don't want to be in, doing a job they don't want to do. And, you know, it really comes across. Yes, some of the dialogue is a little bit heavy-handed with the foreshadowing, definitely, as Duncan says, like just slipping it in. Yeah, I got, that nyctophobia, scared of the dark. All right, well, you're in a spooky fucking asylum, mate. So
also, it's just completely unnecessary because when the lights go out, anybody would be scared in that situation. So it's like it's just completely unnecessary to say he has a fear of the dark. I would be scared. I don't have a fear of the dark.
I will add, though, the scene where he's in the tunnel and the lights are going off and he's running down the tunnel.
One of the best versions of that you've ever seen in it.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. That might be, with the exception of the reveal at the end, that might be the best scene in the film.
The mega shot, yeah.
Yeah, it's just so well shot. And, you have to also understand, we're really talking about a genre movie. One of the things that I realized we've done accidentally as well is there's all overlap between all the four films in this arc. We've got 2 Asylum movies, right? We've got Cure and Kill List, which are both like allegorical, right? We've also got probably a little bit of allegory with this, which we might get into. They all kind of intermingle a little bit in terms of there's a little bit of overlap with the way that they're structured and the plotting. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think just before we start talking about some of the more minutiae with it, they just nailed it. This is just a dream venue. Like to get this place and just be able to point a camera, because this was filmed on like Digicam, like 24 frames. It's like, old school shit. To just point that at a wall and the blistered and cracked institutional colored paint, is there. That green that you see in every fucking hospital the world over, it seems. That just adds so much value to it. And once, whether you know it or not, when you're watching it, it feels like a real fucked up, creepy asylum. Like, you look at it and you go, huh, yeah, that is, actually, I don't think I'd want to hang out there, and so whether you know it or not, the actual setting is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this movie.
What the fuck is this?
Oh, what are you, a little scared, Phil? This is hydrotherapy. Used to be cutting edge. They soak the nut jobs in cold water. I guess that was the way to chill them out. I don't know. Or they'd give them a lobotomy.
By the way, for people who are American, the character that is played by Peter Mullan that Richard's talking about, the Scottish guy, essentially, the Gordon character, that is literally the most working class accent you can have in the UK. That's why he's perfectly cast as someone who just does a shit manual labor job like this and literally has his thermos flask and goes home to his wife and his dog. Like that whole, like, fucking that drawl, even that fucking, like, the harshness of the way you pronounce it. It's like a Glaswegian type accent if people don't know. Like that in the UK you instantly know what sort of character that is going to be. Obviously, his voice, by the way, is the ultimate gravelly voice. It's a mega one.
Who are those 2 guys you were talking to yesterday?
What guys?
I saw you. And what were you talking about?
And I actually think in contrast, because of how understated he is, really well with David Caruso. Because I was saying to Monty, David Caruso, in a way, could have had a career where he could have been like a Nick Cage, mate. Yeah, he can chew the scenery up, but he does it well, and you can like him in films. And I think if he really wanted to, he could probably do more serious films and be a bit pared back, By the way, he's brilliant as the guy who's the up-tempo guy in this, because he's sort of the guy driving some of the plot. Like even brings the cringe that people loved him for in CSI. Like I told Monty, one of the most iconic moments in this, one of the only laughs, is when he just goes, "Fuck you," like right in the guy's face. And he's like, "You're gonna hit me, Gotti? You're gonna hit me?"
Okay. Jeff, Mike, go downstairs, make sure he doesn't turn around. You come with me.
Hey.
Fuck you.
And like, also, he does a great job because of how over the top he is, where if you're not paying attention, to be fair, I've watched this film a few times. If you're watching it the first time, they don't always spell everything out. So there is a part where you might actually think 4/5 of the way through, he did all the murders. You might actually believe that because he's also such an intense character. And so I also think some of the, it's actually just, like I said, it's a sleeper cast too. You kind of wouldn't expect this level of performance, but I think they're really well cast too.
I've got a story about Peter Mullan as it happens. Right. So, and I'm devastated that this happened, but my friends went on a holiday to Europe one year and I couldn't go. I had esports work, esports ruining my life since 2004. And they went.
He says
and they
while
went
recording
to...
from an esports event.
Yeah, I know. Fuck it.
Yeah, he's not
All
out yet.
in.
He's still in prison. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Break me
And
out. Break
like
me out.
institutionalization, he couldn't live on the outside down once.
This is it. This is my session 9.
Exactly.
Anyway, they went to Budapest and they went out to a late night bar. Obviously Budapest, a big place. And one of the guys that I used to do esports websites with, like my assistant editor, he said, "Fucking hell, that's Peter Mullan." Now, my assistant editor, a guy called Mick, he's from Scotland. He's from a pretty rough estate in Glasgow called Castlemilk. And he said, "Fucking hell, that's Peter Mullan."
Real.
Peter,
that's not a real name.
Yeah.
People have
Castlemilk,
very old-fashioned names
and
and shit there. Yeah.
Oh, and it's a tasty place to live, brother. I'll tell you that for free. So anyway, he went up to see Peter Mullan, and he went, "Oh, hello, fucking loved you in Tyrannosaur or whatever it was." And Peter Mullan was out there filming that Hercules movie he did with The Rock. Right, and he'd just
Thankfully,
gone out
I missed
for a drink.
That one. Wasn't aware that film existed.
Yeah, I know. Right, I'm pretty sure it was a Hercules. I'm pretty sure it's Hercules. Anyway, he said, "Oh, you got a Scottish accent. Where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, I'm from Castlemilk." He went, "Fucking hell, that's a shithole. Like, you want to sit down and get a drink?" And he said, like, Peter Mullan spent all night genuinely interested, genuinely warm. And he said, "Bring your friends over as well, and we'll have a sit down." He was telling them everything about the onset antics. People were asking, like, "Is the Rocket tonight?" He goes, "Drinking with us. You must be fucking crazy." Like, it was. He said he was such a lovely guy, and he spent all evening like just drinking with these randoms. So I fucking love this guy. Like, I'm devastated. That is a secondhand story. I wanted that to be my story, but it is.
When you said you were devastated and then led into your friends meeting him, I thought you were going to say he's like a total asshole or something like that.
No,
you're just
I'm
devastated because you weren't there.
Bro, I'd have been like, "Fuck off with you, Mick. I come from a rough estate as well, Peter. Love me, because he's just so good." But yeah, anyways, apparently by all accounts, he is just a lovely, down-to-earth man. And as I said, I think he's criminally underrated as an actor. Like, he always brings his all to every part. And by the way, at the end, with the breakdown, right, with the big reveal, he fucking sells it. He sells it. We've all seen a horror movie, right, where it's like really, really good, and it gets to the end, and the scary bit happens, and the guy just goes like full Nick Cage in fucking Long Legs, which I saw recently. And by the way, just to let you all know, for Halloween, it's dog shit. It is fucking whack. Don't watch it. It is trash. I've never been more disappointed.
I don't normally buy into all the like hype on the internet. "Oh, you gotta watch this."
Yeah.
Going what? I did. I waited till it came out.
Yep, same.
Regrets. I have regrets. And I love Nick Cage, so I have regrets about that one.
I wanted a police procedural, atom smashing of like Seven and Zodiac.
Yeah.
I was ready for that.
Bro,
and what I got was
scenes make you think this could be good. It's shit after that. Absolute shit.
No, it's dog shit. It's really dog shit, guys.
And I thought Nick Cage being bad was impossible because being bad's what he does. He's so good at being bad.
He's bad at being bad in this.
That's how badly done this film is.
It's dreadful.
It's a unicorn.
Tell us what you think about Long Legs in the comments below. It's dog shit. If you like it, you're dog shit.
Skip
Right,
it.
anyway, so skip it, definitely.
And therefore, if you say you like it in the comments, just say,
this.
if you like it, just say, "I'm dog shit." That's your comment. Leading from
Yeah,
Uncle.
exactly. I'm dog shit. But yeah, I mean, like Peter Mullan sends it. There's nothing worse than getting to a horror movie and it just falling flat, the big reveal not working, the big twist not working. Peter Mullan sends it. Like, and you believe he's had a breakdown. His call to his now, as we find out, deceased wife and kid.
Yeah.
It's very emotional. And, it takes a special kind of actor to be able to deliver what is fantastical, supernatural, to deliver it with a very grounded, serious way. You've really got to be on your game.
I am so lonely here. I want to come home. I want to hold you.
If Caruso was playing Gordon, nobody would like nobody would like this movie because the end would probably be ridiculous. It's not Caruso's fault; it's just who he is. It's hard to believe he won a Golden Globe. Like, no, was it gold? Yeah, it was a Golden Globe. He won a Golden Globe.
Wow.
He was really good in NYPD Blue. I'm telling you, if you've ever watched the first season of NYPD Blue, he killed it. But anyway, Peter Mullan for me, it's his movie. Everyone else is really good in it. But, he just nails the ending, which is essential for a movie like this, because if it's all build up, the end has to work. And if it doesn't, then the movie is inherently bad. And Peter Mullan is really like kind of the scaffolding that holds the movie upright.
You gotta wake up.
You tell me where they are.
Would you wake up?
Tell me. Would you wake up?
I am fucking awake!
Hey! Gordon.
I also think, by the way, the ending is one of the most satisfying payoffs because it manages to do the two things you need to do beautifully in a film. Funnily enough, actually, this is the one thing I'll give to the Blair Witch Project. I thought a lot of the Blair Witch Project was bollocks and it was just like idiots in the all scared in the theater together. But the ending is good if you know the premise of what the story is. Like, it's a mega payoff. Like, it's that thing. It's why but this has the mega payoff, which does draw everything together. But crucially, like the end of Blair Witch, hence why the Blair Witch Project 2 is utter dog shit. Don't even watch it. It's offensively bad. It keeps the mistake. It doesn't spell it out. It doesn't go, this is literally a demon. No, that's not. There's a totally separate interpretation. Hence why, by the way, the guy who wrote the film tells a story within it about the idea of like satanic panic within America and the idea of like all psychological things. Also, by the way, there's a concept you have to understand in this film. Funnily enough, it actually exists both in psychological phenomenon and within like the conspiracy world, where they actually think there is demonic possession, which is the idea of alters, if people don't know, which is the idea that when someone has a traumatic experience, their consciousness sort of fragments to protect them from the traumatic experience and creates a second personality. So in this case, obviously this woman that we find out about has many personalities and they're all interacting with each other and everything. And that's actually part of the dynamic because actually, as you'll find out later, the clever thing as well is notice they drip feed you that as well. Early on, you're just hearing from like the innocent, most basic alters of like her and the princess and Billy and all that. And by the way, again, great audio design. The voices being used, it is clearly an adult woman doing a silly voice of Billy and I'm the princess and I want to.
Have you seen our doll, Mr. Doctor?
Who am I speaking with?
Mary got a China doll from her mommy.
And then that's why, by the way, this is the genius part people will miss. All those voices are clearly a woman doing that. But then at the end, when you get to meet this one character you haven't met yet, Simon, that's not her voice. That is some fucked up, like, vocal. I don't know what they've done to it, but that is like the best voice for an evil entity I've ever heard. It's like iconic. It's that like... It's got like a hiss to it that's fucking sick. Again,
it reminded me
mega on this.
Peter was naughty, Doc.
It reminded me of Brad Dourif's voice that he did in Exorcist 3.
Right. Okay.
Which Exorcist 3 Legion, which is fucking amazing.
Which you were thinking of picking for this arc, actually.
Yeah, because it's got the greatest jump scare in horror history, probably, but it's certainly top 3, and is just a wonderfully performed film. But we didn't do it. But yeah, I mean, I'll also add there've been a lot of films that have dealt with this subsequently, actually. There was one with John Cusack called Identity, which was ultimately, you've seen that as well. Yeah, it's like all these different people are in a hotel room, but they've all got the same key with the same number, and they don't know why and what's going on. And you can probably tell by the title, really, where that one's going. But I won't spoil it just in case. But really, this was kind of like a fresh spin on something, because we'd gone through the 80s, and I thought it was kind of a meta commentary almost with the satanic panic stuff, because we had all those satanic possession movies. The popularity of The Exorcist was so insane. The fact that it was like, ooh, it was that was TM, the scariest movie ever. It was banned in the UK for many years, and when it got re-released, I went to the cinema to see it, and as soon as the possessed kid said, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell," the whole fucking cinema cracked up laughing. I'm like, you're ruining my night.
Two quick things. One, Monty, this is why I have to explain British culture to you. The genius is that was still the era before they just let everything in full degeneracy go mad. Yeah. When they still held on to some sort of like Victorian British sense of being proper. And so the notion was, Monty, it wasn't just this. Are you ready? This will blow your mind. A Clockwork Orange was banned in the UK, Monty, because the premise was the youth will see this. They will be it will ruin
and they go
them.
looking for the old in-out.
And they will just run wild and do all these things, and that will spoil the youth, basically. So that's why you couldn't let them watch Exorcist. And similarly, a second thing, here's a banger sidebar for you. It's going to be a quick one. Here's an anecdote. It's not me that it happened to. It's a friend of a friend, but this is a real story, and it's one of the funniest stories ever. I think I might have even told Richard on By the Numbers before. Right, so Monty, there's a friend of a friend, and he goes for a date with a girl that he's really into, and on the date, he goes like, she says something like, "Oh, my middle name's Carrie," or something, right? And he goes, "Oh, Carrie, eh? Well, you know what? Your mother sucks cocks in hell." Well, that's The Exorcist. Like, Carrie's the one with the flies. So that has no context to this girl whatsoever. And he doesn't realize, this is the perfect part, until later, after the date, when someone tells him, that's not even the movie, is it? Like, she'd never be able to get that reference. And then he realized, not only have I fucked it, and that's something you're going to think about forever, by the way. You're going to bed on the pillow thinking about that 10 years. And even better, if you were to construct...
I'm going to be thinking about it.
If you were to construct the most insane, out-of-context thing to say to a woman on a first date that she could have no way of knowing, that would be it. That's like Mad Men. How would I say something insane that would ensure? Just say to her after she says her name, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell," and then go on like that's just nothing. It's mental, isn't it? I had to just tell you that. This is so out there.
This episode's going to get monetized, lads.
It is good.
Yeah, what an insane thing. Anyway, it is demonic possession movies were big, but it's a bit played out if it's demonic. But what was interesting is we started getting in the 2000s, we started getting like more about this. Is it demonic? Is it Satan, or is it something else? Sure. Is it like there's an interesting theory around this movie, which is ultimately, and this is where it has overlap with Cure, which we'll talk about obviously next week. But the malevolent spirit, Simon, can sort of only enter you at a point when you're at your weakest ebb and liable to do something anyway. Perfect. And obviously that's what the last line is. What is it? I live in the weak and the wounded. Yeah, in the weak and the wounded. Yeah.
And where do you live, Simon?
I live in the weak and the wounded.
So obviously that in itself sort of throws up this question, because, similar to Cure in the sense that you can't be hypnotized to do something you don't want to do. And what the movie is all about is that repression and resentment that's building up in Japanese society. Here, these, this guy, ultimately, this is a movie about a working class guy who's not making money, who's a new father that has been pushed to his fucking limits. He's not getting jobs anymore. He's losing bids. He's losing sleep. And now he's got more responsibilities than ever.
Metaphorically, his life is that pot of fucking bobbling stuff on the stove. It's about to fucking pour over. Yeah, there's so many themes laced into this. Yeah.
Well, and crucially, it's his, family, his daughter spills it on him. His wife spills it on him. And that's when he has the reaction. And in his mind, because it slowly drip feeds you this information. In his mind, he thinks he's hit her, and he's
it's genius, isn't it? Like I said, it just keeps changing. That story gradually drip feed changes also as we're going.
if it was a dog barking. I don't know if it was Emma crying. But I slapped her. I hit my wife.
What you notice is there's one scene where he's wiping red off his hands. I think it's like he's got dry blood in his hands. You don't think anything of it at the time.
No.
And then there's another scene where the flowers he takes to his wife in the flashback are just in the asylum.
Yep.
So what's happened there? And it's like, if you're paying attention, and it might take a second watch, honestly. As I said, I've seen this before.
It's got some layered details you don't get on the first one, for sure, mate.
But I mean, ultimately, just metatextually speaking, he's fucking broke. He's had enough.
Even when you split up the phone call, once you know at the end it's a phone call to no one, all those phone calls could be to no one. As I said, the incident could have happened at the beginning of the movie, and that's why he's already got the cyber voice in his head. But we think it's set up as though that's what I thought happened. Yeah,
I mean, that's what I thought happened was that it had already, it had already happened before the movie started.
That's why he keeps replaying that scene, because if you don't know, one of the weird things about memory is it doesn't. If people don't know, the reason I have an amazing memory in esports is I also do a lot of research that refreshes my memory and corrects like the incorrect misperceptions you have. Because one of the problems with memory is when you remember something, you play a little movie in your head, and if the details are wrong, you now like misremember it as being real. And that's actually how I even think people like lie to themselves. Also. So you can tell like he's doing that in this film as well. It's one of the compelling films. By the way, the coolest thing about this film is it could have had no satanic, demonic / weird payoff, and it would have still had mad tension throughout the whole film. Even if it's just that he went mentally killed this person, there was all tension between all the characters. By the way, every single person has someone they have tension within the movie in some way, and there's some dynamic going on and being played out.
Yeah, and there's also something interesting going on that I can't quite articulate, but having the gambling addict find all the silver dollars in the hidden cash inside the wall, it's like
the crematorium.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where it's like, by the way, what a piece of shit. He's like pulling out fucking like glass eyes and gold teeth. And he's like, God, these eyes have got to be worth something. Like,
you want him to get $4. There's almost the karmic aspect of it. If you're going to nick all this money, you're not even telling anything about it and all that. And you've stolen the guy's wife as well. At that point, you can get wrecked too, mate.
Yeah, he is a massive piece of shit. But it's interesting. It's almost as if, and this is where
great casting. If you were going to cast a character actor who is the swagged out, easily fucking cool, charismatic guy who would fuck your ex, that's him. They fucking nailed it with the casting. He nails it. That Josh Lucas guy fucking kills it.
Yeah, he really is. And like the way, I love the ironic when he's talking to the young guy with the mullet, the Theo Von looking motherfucker. And he's going, you know what, man, you got to have an exit plan. Like, you've got no plans, you fucking moron. You are the most deadbeat piece of shit, relying on an imaginary fucking gambling system to hit the jackpot. That is the definition of no plan whatsoever.
Because I got a fucking exit plan, man. I got a way of dealing with the stress. You think Mikey reads all those books for fun? Nah, man. He's got an exit plan, let me tell you.
But anyway, when I don't know if is the asylum setting him up for that, or is that incidental? Because it is a strange coincidence that the guy who's the gambling addict wins the metaphorical jackpot. The guy who's got nyctophobia, he goes into the dark, so is there like some sort of malevolent sentience
that Satan is real and that it was a satanic panic uncovers that it's a demonic entity? By the way, here's a detail people don't realize about this movie. I didn't till I watched it like a third time. This is the craziest part when you know this. None of the rest of them ever have a conversation about those tapes. Only Mike ever listens to those tapes and knows the story of Simon and the woman. The rest of them are just working a gig, and at the end, someone starts killing everyone. They have no way to avoid this. That young kid who's at the van, hey, I'm sorry about that. He can't know that his fucking uncle's going to come and fucking kill him. None of them can. There's no hints to them. In fact, they're just hearing that story every day as he keeps building the life. Yeah, she's still having a hard time with, this still got that thing through the christening. Yeah, it's hanging around, They're just experiencing that. So the other thing about the dread is, this is another genius thing about horror, is when you don't make every character aware of what's going on. These are just people going out. They are sheep to the slaughter. They can't know this. Only the Mike guy is down there as his sort of like way to dick off, rather, because he's overqualified for this job. And as I say, his whole shit is, well, don't worry about the satanic panic stuff. Like, no, that was real. Just turned out it was just some psychological shit. And then the joke is, as he finds out, he only finds out at the end himself, like there's some malevolent fucked up element that can't make sense to him. It's like, it's fucking genius. Even film, by the way. I even love that one scene where when he goes out, like it just is playing like by itself or whatever, and it's playing some stuff that he doesn't even hear. He doesn't even hear what's in that scene. Oh, that's what I mean. It's such a subtle film. I can see why, unfortunately, like I say, a lot of people on Reddit just missed it and thought nothing was going on.
Yeah, and we can talk about this before we discuss the ending, but I think we touched on it earlier, but the undercurrent of the asbestos, because I love the setup for this, because it's very plausible, right? Everything was built with asbestos. If you guys don't know what it is actually, it's not an artificial chemical, right? It's a natural fiber that is mined and has been mined for like thousands of years. People allege that Charlemagne actually had a tablecloth woven of asbestos. So instead of cleaning it, they would light it on fire.
Only Monty could come up with a fact like that for this podcast. That's fucking hilarious. Charlemagne. He doesn't mean Charlemagne God, by the way, just to put that out there as well.
No, I mean the guy from France a long time ago. But in any case, like, when we're looking at asbestos, it is something that has existed and people have been using it for a very, very, very long time. And when it was used heavily in building construction, so it was often mined frequently in China, and it was then turned into tiles or other fireproof material. And the thing
even used to put it in our lofts and insulation in houses.
It's a very efficient. It's very efficient. It literally will not catch on fire. So if you have this building material, it helps fireproof houses, helps lower danger. Now the problem is that it's normally inert, but if you start to do construction and you start breaking it apart and it gets into the air, that's when it becomes a giant problem.
There was a million lawsuits, by the way. That's also why they took it out. There was a billion lawsuits of people who breathed it in, basically, as they were doing it,
If you are American, you probably have seen these like TV commercials for law firms for mesothelioma, which is the type of lung cancer that you get from... You have to work with asbestos a lot. Obviously, you're not going to get mesothelioma from doing one job, but if you were in construction or destruction and you were breaking apart these, or you were replacing somebody's floor tiles or an office's built like ceiling tiles, these types of things, insulation on around pipes that we see in this movie, if you were repeatedly exposed to it, and that's why they say, when he is warning, when Hank is warning Jeff, the nephew.
It's also because like as a cunt, he's just doing it like
wear your mask because it gets inside of you.
It's when he goes like that sort of music, heavy metal, is going to bring it out the walls. You need to put on like Yanni or Enya or something because he's just fucking with me. But that kid's just like, oh okay. It's like,
and again, that's one of the things you do. The new guy on the building site.
In the UK, by the way, you always reckon with that shit. Of course, you do it famously. You tell Monty go and get a left-handed wrench and all that shit. All that shit. Yes.
Of course. Same shit everywhere. But these guys are working around it. It is true. Obviously, there is this danger, and I think that these themes really play super nicely into the movie because obviously the idea that there is a latent danger that when they start rustling it up within the asylum then enters them. So because the ending of this film is intentionally ambiguous, right? We don't know whether Simon is some sort of independent, malevolent entity that is like transferring into Gordon because the previous host, Mary, died in the asylum, and he is the weak and the wounded who is entering the asylum, who then Simon latches into, or because it's a mental institution. Is there some sort of implication that among the weak and the wounded, there is some corrosive psychological force where Simon is independently arising psychologically within people? It's not some sort of spirit, right? It is something that is a response to overwhelming stress situations, right? And that this is the fear is that it could rise within me or you or anybody under the right circumstances. And so I think that really informs a lot of the interpretations that you're going to make about the end of this film and why Gordon does the things he does and why we hear about Mary, I believe is the name of the woman in the tapes, Mary Hobbs, and why she is in the mental asylum and undergoing these interviews. And Obviously, session 9, the names came from the taped sessions 1 through 9, 9 being the final one where the Simon character comes out. She has multiple personality or what dissociative identity disorder, whatever it's called now, and they changed the name in the DSM whatever edition is out now. And so, and I think they do, from what I'm aware of, a pretty accurate version of that kind of disorder where, as Thorin mentioned, she is doing the voices, but that's what people frequently do with that disorder.
No, that's a real thing. Yeah. By the way, here's the detail
it
as
came
well.
up again in that Split as well with that James McAvoy movie. You know?
Think about this. He's called Simon. Simon Says. There's even that aspect you can play on as a child. If you don't know as well, there's little details people miss in this one. Because one of the things I like is it doesn't spell it out. So in the same way as the way you can build up eventually that it was Gordon the whole time, is because, for example, like Richard says, his story doesn't check out. As in the facts of the movie show, it's not. When they go there, the Hank guy, to get the coins, he sees the Jif fucking famous like peanut butter jar. Well, that was in the bag of Gordon at the beginning, wasn't it? That was one of the main things with the thermos and the flowers. Then also you have Gordon, remember, who's unaware of any of this psychology. He doesn't know about the Mary Hobbs character. He knows nothing about her. He ends up in her room 444. When he's outside and he's having a bit of a breakdown, he's over a grave. That's the 444 grave, which we assume is her grave. Like, again, what they're trying to build up, like you say, is, look, crucially, I think the way this movie works is like this. It's a mirror of you. If you think there's no evil element in the world, some of these are coincidences or flourishes that filmmaker used to be clever and put symmetries into the movie and mirroring and resonances. But to you, it's just like Richard says. It's why we'll probably talk about this in Cure. It's the idea that when people break, does something else is like an emergency activation of an operating system that takes over and does something to get you out of the situation, that fight or flight type response, but psychologically. Or if you believe there are malevolent forces, then this is actually a really well done, slow build up to how you could get possessed by one, because you're constantly in and around all that, experiencing similar sorts of trauma. You're even literally going to the grave. You're in the room with all the things. And then that's why I also thought it's a great detail that at the end, when they come in, he's put all of his pictures in that room, like she had when she was the nutter in that cell. Like,
I told her to cut them up too.
it's actually, like I say, it's one of the ones where you're either going to think we're reading too much into it, or you're going to get the kind of the gist of it. And I think if you get the whole thing, the big picture, it's actually also a really well-structured film. It's also, by the way, not too long at all. It's not too short. I think they also nailed the pacing, even though some people think it's slow. I think it's great. I think it's a great film.
Yeah, I mean, I'll also add as well, like, in any horror movie, a good horror movie fan appreciates the kills, right? And obviously, as it starts unwinding at the end and we start realizing that, Gordon has lost his mind, there's a really good couple of, like wincing moments, because, one thing that you have a natural kind of fear of is and so again, they set it up at the start of the movie because, even in a low budget movie like this, pay attention, Hollywood, you can do setups and payoffs.
Monty, you were loving this, mate. It has your Tyrannosaurus. It has your Velociraptor scene from Jurassic Park in the film. He explains to that kid to fuck with him how you do. That's exactly the Velociraptor scene. There you go.
It's funny. I was going to mention that, Thorin, where he was like trying to scare the kid with the asbestos in exactly the same way as in Jurassic Park. Sam Neill tries to scare the kid with a Velociraptor talon.
And when he gets him with the eye over lunch with the stick,
The lobotomy,
they talk about how these lobotomies work going in through the eye, and then later you see the piece of shit that you've assumed to be dead.
Exactly.
Actually having had the lobotomy. By the way, probably the cruelest fate is meted out to the worst person by design. And then obviously he does another one. And like things going into eyes, that's a fucking horror staples, a horror classic. Like people will definitely wince at that, but it's still not overtly gory. This isn't this isn't a gory movie at the end. It doesn't ramp up to turning into a slasher, although you could say this is a movie where ultimately it's we're kind of watching it from the slasher's perspective, and the slasher just happens to be, schizophrenic or have MPD or something. So
doesn't that also make that kill of the fucking stupid kid better as well? That's just the camera running at him like that, and he's just floating away. That's also a fucking cool
he's
scene
like,
as well.
Uncle, like, I ran out, all the lights went out. I'm sorry. I put some shit in your van.
It's like, bro, you're the last one to get murked. This ain't gonna work out for you. I know, it's brilliant. I love it.
I'm sorry, man. I was freaking out. The lights went out. I got these in the van. Is that okay?
Yeah. So let's get to theories, because there's obviously, I think there's like 3 ways to interpret the movie, and I think one of the reasons this movie does have a cult following and has endured is that, ambiguity that people like to explore. So I think broadly you can sum it thusly. Ultimately, you can argue it is coincidental. Gordon is just a working class man who was snapped. He is on a job, and all of the pageantry, all of the trappings around him, there is no supernatural element. That's ultimately a red herring. You can also say that, the place in itself is it has some sort of malevolent presence, like the asbestos. It is something that will get under your skin. It will make you behave in a way that the place itself is just like inherently evil and corrupting, and that's why it actually on some level affects all of them. It just affects Gordon the worst.
By the way, I'll give you a quick sidebar on that. Here's an angle people don't realize. There's a famous concept which people might have heard famously. The most well-known example is obviously the praying mantis. So the famous thing, Monty, where when a praying mantis has sex, then the female chops it. It turns out they only do that in captivity. That's just nothing to do with prayer. In wild, that's not what happens. Similarly, if you go to a zoo, the apes just beat off all the time. Yeah, they do that when they're in captivity. They're in prison, mate. When humans are in prison, they fuck each other up the arse, even if they claim to be straight. Like, what this actually implies is like actually settings and environments also infer like how your psychological process. That's that's a thing layered into it, Richard. It could also just be that this place is so creepy and fucked up, and everything about it's scary and creepy. Even if you're just doing a cleanup job, like, of course that'd make you paranoid. And you've got all these personal tensions and petty beefs. You add that into it, of course you could be fucking spiraling. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and then obviously the third and I guess the most popular, I would say, is that Simon is a genuine malevolent force. All the others, they were multiple personality disorders. Mary was sick, but the princess and Billy and whoever else, they are just voices. They're just manifestations, aspects of herself. But Simon, as evidenced by the fact he has this consistent voice, a voice that no woman could emulate, it's clearly something to itself. Simon actually is a malevolent force that can jump from body to body.
Sounds like someone taking relish in being evil. It just has that sort of like a smirk to it. Almost. You can't even see a face, by the way. Also, by the way, that shot where they just do like the face. When you find out, it's fucking brilliantly done as well. Yeah. It's well done.
What another movie it kind of reminded me of, and this actually, I was just looking at the year. It did come out before, but it was the Denzel Washington movie Fallen.
By the way, that's one we should definitely watch on this series. That is a sleeper and a half if you've never seen it. It's a banger.
Yeah, and a lot of people haven't actually, which is kind of weird. I mean, a funny story. Denzel Washington passed on the Seven script. He could have had Morgan Freeman's part. And Denzel Washington said he didn't want to do a movie that just felt that evil. And then obviously a few years later he did Fallen, which is literally about a demon that can jump from person to person. And he's like got to try and track them down because he's making really people murder people.
The premise is great, but it's really well done, Monty. Because you can imagine what a great concept for a movie. It can really, in fact, each actor has to play that they're possessed. And you can imagine you're telling everyone, no, it's that guy. And then they're all like, what are you talking about? So it's actually a sleeper for real. Everyone watching the show should go watch that movie.
Yeah, let's hope it's not a Batman Returns. I don't think it is, but
surely. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it bombed at the box office. It was a stinker, a rare miss for Denzel.
And then Denzel was anyway, tell you what, I'm just going to remake fucking shit from the 70s. Equalizer 7, it is.
I mean, by the way,
Denzel, you're better than this.
No, but you're right. But I still watch all their movies.
Listen, he's a mega actor. He's got an amazing flaw to his game. Yeah.
Yeah. I love Denzel. So whatever, I'll watch any old shit he's in. But yeah, so this is the third theory, that there is a demonic jumper called Simon who can enter your body, as he says, the weak and the wounded, when you're at your lowest ebb, and make you do horrific things for his own entertainment. Crucially, there's a cheekiness to his delivery of the lines. He's relishing in the details when he's talking to the doctor about making Mary stab this person and all the blood coming out. And
you cut her up real good, Doc. It's like, oh, it's fucking sick. So there's so many iconic lines in this.
And I told her to cut up Peter, Doc. To cut him up real bad, too.
So, I mean, I'm guessing you probably I'll ask both of you.
I like the third one.
No. Yeah, number 3, right?
This is what makes an interesting film, because if you watch it many times in your life, you might change perspective. So when I watched the film first, this is even one of the, because it came out in 2001, so I would have been like 18. So when I saw this film, I remember this is where I even found out about the concept of satanic panics. It was a famous thing mostly in America, obviously. Yep. And I remember finding it out, and it was one of those ones where, as a young person, you think you know a fact, and now you repeat that. So, actually, it was just a thing that was debunked, and then they found that she actually had a hymen, so she couldn't have been raped. All I'll say is this: over the years, as I've gotten more into other areas, I go towards the third one, because I actually think some of the satanic panic stuff was also, I've just looked into this topic, corrupt journalists and basically officials and people covering things up. I think sometimes they did cover up murders and cults. And think a famous one, you can look up the Finders cult. There's a famous one for you online if you want to know about that. Some of these things did happen, but they did just put the genie back in the bottle using media. And then they told everyone, with films like this, like, it wasn't anything real. It was just a fucking, imagine people just went out of control doing that, which I'll say also makes this movie extra based. Because if the guy who wrote the movie put himself as the character who explains it's all not real, but then at the end, it is real, potentially. What is he actually saying? Like, I like the cut of his jib, whatever he's doing there. I see what you're doing there, man. I see. Yeah, it's not real, is it? It's just, you can interpret it many ways, can't we? Yes. What Simon says, exactly, yes. I know. So I'm just saying, the movie's gotten more based for me. I think it's become fantastic at the end, yeah. And also, as an aside, I do think as well, this is my own personal take, you don't have to buy into this, I actually do think it's the other way around. I have inverted the polarity most people use. So, most people go, throughout all of history, they had like angels and demons and fairies and elves and, mystical creatures. And what that was like, aliens. But back then they didn't know what aliens were, because they weren't like us all enlightened with tech and Elon Musk and stuff. So they just interpreted it with the religious imagery of their day. I think it's the other way around. I think actually aliens is to make and evil entities seem like they're palatable and they're just other things from other planets. I think that these sorts of things are ways of telling people, it's not actually anything fucked up and creepy and external. It's just some psychological process in you. Everyone could create in their mind a character that's malevolent evil and make a young girl just go and slice up her parents, which I noticed, by the way, is the ultimate get out for any crime or murder. A kid just snapped and just fucking killed everyone. I'll also point this out, by the way. This is an angle people won't think about, is even though, yes, if your daughter came in, you'd be shocked and you wouldn't immediately fucking cap her in the head, would you? So you'd talk with her, you'd go, what's going on, darling? Same time, I'll just put this out there. How could, like, a little girl just cut up 2 adult people? Surely they'd fight it off, unless you get some extra force from the fucking thing. Now, again, are you ready? In real life, they're going to go, well, that's like that weird phenomenon. Because what's genius about secular modern culture is you just take the most mystical things in the world and you just change the words and the framing and it becomes everyday. So you go, that's nonsense. Someone creating things and they're like designing them. Now what happened was all of the universe came out of nothing. Do you believe that? Right. Well, but from after that, then a rock basically came alive, and then eventually put a billion in there. 10 billion in there, put 10 billion in there, and eventually you're there with a computer on an aeroplane, and there's nothing weird about that. That's just totally normal. This could have happened to anyone by chance. You're just unlucky or lucky, depending on how your life went. So you got that whole aspect. And so I think at the end of it all, you do just make it so that everything's just humdrum, and it's like, when a baby's under the car, she just gets like 4 times her physical strength and lifts the car off. Whoa, well, that's nothing weird then. No, Thorin, it's a psychological process. You have to understand psychological. All I'm going to say is, looking at people who made psychology. They were the most fucked up, degenerate people of all time. And this is their psyop on humanity. Anyway, that ends my run. That's
yeah, no, it's great.
There's my
So,
rant.
I think
it wouldn't be an episode of this podcast without psyop being
There you go.
used. So
There you go.
I think what's interesting about the end of this movie, though, is that there is a tension, and it's really the not knowing which one it is.
Yeah, of course.
That makes this so good,
It would
right?
be worse if they told you. It'd be worse if there was some
a million
actual
times worse. But
scene that showed you what it was or something,
so-
wouldn't it? It'd be bollocks.
what I think is so cool about this is by using the woman with the multiple personalities. So first off, that is incredibly fascinating that the human mind can compartmentalize trauma in that way, which it absolutely can under the right circumstances. I mean, it's tragic, but it is fascinating that the human mind is capable of that. And because they use the dissociative identity disorder in order to kind of bring forth Simon, the implication is if her mind is capable of having all these characters, isn't Gordon's mind capable of having two characters within it? Is Simon part of the unconscious that emerges? If, like you said, Thorin, at the start of the movie, he's obviously stretched very thin. He needs this job, so he has to promise to do it faster. And then he gets boiling water poured onto him.
He has to hire his fucking stupid kid nephew to do it as well. And then you notice at the beginning of the movie, right, bloody hell, it's a 3-week job. We can do it in 2 outside the thing. I need this job. We'll do it in 1. It's like they're just making all the tension and fucked up. Like I say, this would be a tense movie without even the supernatural element.
1 week. 1 week. That's fast.
I'm good for it. You know I'm good for it. I need the job.
Right. And
we need the bonus. Oh, you better do the fucking job. We need that bonus, mate. Yeah, it's all brilliant.
But he says it himself where he snaps because the dog is barking and the baby's crying and obviously he hasn't been sleeping and the boiling water. And, you wonder in that moment, like, sure, most of us would just get angry, but is there some level of resentment towards that situation with the right person and the right psychological pressure that results in Simon, manifesting, right? And then the obvious question is that just a malevolent spirit? Because we know from Mary Hobbs that Simon didn't manifest originally in the asylum, manifested in her home, right? And manifested in Gordon's home. I mean, he actually gets talked to at the beginning, but I think the events happened before the movie started. So you wonder maybe it is some sort of, it could be a malevolent spirit. It could be some aspect of human psychology. And I think that's the scary thing is it's like, if you're in that moment of vulnerability, is the impetus to kill coming from yourself, or is there some sort of external force that is then drawn into you and that then controls you and uses you to commit these heinous acts? Because Mary, we learn, she was a little girl, had the China doll. It gets broken on top of her. That's why she has the scars on her chest. She snaps, takes her brother's new knife, and then kills her family. And that's why she's in the mental asylum. That's why she undergoes this. But there's a question with Mary as to, because we don't think she had the dissociative identity disorder before doing this, right? Because that was the cause of the disorder happening, one would assume. So Simon appears before the rest of the personalities, which is also very interesting, which makes you wonder, is this Gordon in the future, right? Is Gordon going to disassociate in the same way? I think it's really interesting to think about all the possibilities here.
Yeah, and look, I think as well, one of the things that I kind of like about just the way that it's set up at the end is that ultimately this idea of it is the paranormal running up against the scientific in this weird gray area between those two worlds. Because obviously we know, if you look back at the history of how we treat and handle mental illness, and in terms of it being a solid science, it's changing all the time. Ideas change all the time. Asylums were places of insane levels of cruelty, where people were brutalized and abused, and often the mental health problems, the dissociative state, that's what you'd put yourself into to deal with the environment you were in. Not that it was always there and that's what caused the initial problems. It was almost like the brain's defense mechanism. And then, of course, anytime you act up, you get fucking whacked out with some fucking Thorazine or some shit. These were really bad places. And also, you think about the history of lobotomies into electroshock therapy and how, literally destroying the brain to cure the brain. It is, frightening. But obviously within that, you have this science, which is, it's, multiple personalities, dissociative identity disorder. But then in there is this possibility of malevolent entities entering the body at key moments to make you do things you don't want to do. And so that's kind of where it is like textually interesting, because ultimately, I think, film is, and again, it has this parallel with Cure. I kind of feel that there's a little element to the movie that it doesn't telegraph. It's very subtle, but it's like he's a new father. And when they have that argument and they're going, no, he loves being a father, actually. He loves it. He loves his family, and he loves having a child.
Last few months, Gordo, I'm seeing some cracks, I worry. Mikey knows what I'm talking about, right, Mikey?
He does have the new baby and all.
Should be the joy of his life, dude.
And you're like, you're kind of overselling this a little bit, actually. Like, almost as if, he was like leaping to his defense
it's like
a
you
bit.
say about the end. That's another scene he nails the emotion when he's going, she did have a silly face on, didn't she? It's like, it's so overwrought and so fucking emotional.
Yeah, because, it's like, look, I'm a shock people. I'm not a father, right? Monty's a father. I'm just shock people here. It's fucking stressful having a kid, right? And can confirm,
especially newborns, man, because it's really is the combo of like not sleeping for months, and you're just like you turn into a zombie. It's very unpleasant.
Yeah, and look, like in Cure,
would it be responsible? Say just vape, bro. Just get some fucking weed vape. I would just chill. Hot summer in the city. There you go. Just not advice, not medical advice, by the way. Not a doctor.
Definitely.
For legal purposes, I need to say that. Go on. Richard, I never even thought about this. The actual overlap with Cure is mental. There are so many similar interpretations.
Yeah, because like in Cure, it explicitly says, you can't do anything you don't want to do, and yet these awful things happen. Here, it's kind of like when Simon alludes to the weak and the wounded, what are we really talking about with weakness? And unfortunately, one of the things that does build up in stressful situations, though you hate it within yourself, when a marriage is getting tough, when you're getting sleepless nights because you're raising a kid, when you're watching all the money disappear out your bank account because you need to provide for this new life that maybe you planned for, maybe you didn't, but you are going to do the right thing and raise your kids. There will always be, and it's very human, a lot of people feel guilty about it, but, most therapists will tell you this is normal. You do get that resentment. It can creep in there. You think, fucking hell, I would like... my life would be different if I wasn't here doing this now. And then the stress, Gordon, if he didn't have a kid to provide for, he could probably miss out on one or two of these jobs. Now he can't. Now not only does he have to get this bid, he has to do the impossible. He's doing a massive sprawling asylum, taking all the asbestos out with a really small crew, and he says, I'll do it in 1 week. He's desperate. He's doing that because of this new life, and probably on some level he's thinking, fucking hell, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. How did I get into this? And so I do wonder, a la Cure, if it is essentially that secret resentment that Simon, whatever Simon might be, ultimately exploits.
By the way, Monty, here's where I also think the guy who wrote and acted the part that says it's not real is based. And it's going to be a lead-in for you to talk about a film you won't shut the fuck up about, which is a good but overrated film, Hereditary. So here's how it goes. If people don't know, think about what he says when he tells the story of Satanic Panic and the case that they show isn't true, right? It's the idea a woman claims, a girl, that she was not only like raped by her father in like a basement with like robes, but then eventually she's taken to like public, it's almost like in the forests, where they're all eating like druids and witches and stuff, and they're all in robes, and then they're doing all the things that are in all the stories. They're not only just like rape, they're like making her have babies and then killing the baby in front of them, drinking the blood, or all the shit from the horror movies you remember, like the classics, right?
She'd drink the blood, others would eat the flesh. Her grandfather and father would fuck her repeatedly. She was forced to have abortions, and they'd cook the aborted fetuses.
Enough.
If you don't know, one of the real concepts from the occult is the notion that that's how you would implant demons in you, Monty, like the movie Hereditary. It's the idea you have to evacuate the soul or move it to one side so the rider can come in and take over you. And you have to, in some fucked up way, almost willingly engage in this. That's the genius part. Unlike the movie Richard alluded to, where the demon could just jump from person to person to person. You just have to be sat next. No, it's the idea. This is also what we're going to get into on Cure. It's the idea that you almost have to like allow it in at the end. It has to be your absolute weakest, and that's the moment where it sort of goes like, let me in, and then you let it through, as it were, you know.
That's part of not only the occult, but any initiation, religious initiation experience. Like there has to be an invitation, right? And even if all your defenses are weakened, that's when it gets its most power, because you have to welcome that in, and that's definitely part of Cure, right? Absolutely.
Joining Riot Games.
And Hereditary.
And Hereditary, yeah. And like I do really like Hereditary.
The reason why I thought I'd cue you up is surely it's the same thing, Monty. It's all the idea that like tensions within a normal everyday scenario could be masking the demonic influence that's coming in and fucking your whole life up.
Well, also, the scary thing is that you almost are a puppet in that situation of, everybody in your life could be a malevolent figure who is basically priming you for this experience, which is true of Hereditary and Cure. But you're right. I mean, one of the things that I really like about Hereditary is the leaning on the demonology of everything and having these kind of like occults, the cult societies surrounding them secretly, and people working together who appear to be in your best interest.
There are really Easter eggs if you rewatch it. There's loads.
Listen, I know obviously I'd make a big deal about how pretentious and super smart I am about movies on this show. First time I watched Hereditary, I didn't catch any of that stuff.
Same.
First time around.
It
was like I knew something was kind of off, like particularly the interactions with the friend of the mother and coming round and wanting to do the Ouija board and all that fucked up shit. I was like, there's something not right here, but when I went, obviously I got to the end, and I'll be honest as well, much like Kill List, which I recommended for this arc, the first time I watched it, I was kind of like, I'm actually unsatisfied, because my brain was going in one way and we ended up at a different destination. Yes. Now, what I've learned with age, because all my favorite films, by the way, are movies I initially recoiled from because I think I'm smart and I think I know where it's going. And when it doesn't, I assume, because I couldn't predict it, this must be a bad film. But actually, no, you've had your expectations subverted, not in the Rian Johnson way, but in a good way. And so, No Country for Old Men was another example. Like, when the protagonist, in air quotes, ends up dead at the end, what? This sucks. I wanted him to get away with the money. And then you go back and you watch it and you realize it's one of the best films ever made. But that's kind of how I feel when I watched Hereditary. I immediately watched it again and I was like, oh, wow, this has like a lot of depth going on. But to Duncan's point, there's definitely that aspect to it as well. I mean, what the movie, if you take Simon as being something that has intelligence, what it says about it, how it can only enter into the weak and the wounded, is ultimately kind of the giveaway, which is what why it's the last line. That ultimately there has to be a weakness, which you can argue is a willingness, or you have to be impaired in some way. And as we said, we know with Mary and the boiling water, we can point at them. That could just be a red herring. Right? It doesn't have to be. I mean, the weakness could be his feeling of resentment building up towards his family, having to take these jobs, him looking around at the crew, not liking any of them very much, and him just fucking saying, this can't be my life.
I mean, he also could have cancer.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, also, when you were, I mean, that's telegraphed a lot. So I love that, by the way, when the piece of shit just picks up the asbestos and he's going, this gets in your lungs, man. And he's like throwing it at him. And like neither of them are wearing masks. I'm like, I've seen this a million times on building sites. I've seen it so many times. It just, no one actually gives a fuck.
It incubates in your lungs. Tissue begins to grow around it like a pearl, like a time bomb. Time you hit 30, boom! You're drowning in your own lung fluid.
To emphasize how ubiquitous asbestos was, because as we're saying, if you don't know, guys, essentially entire countries just took it out of everything But there was actually, when I was a boy, it was in a loft one time that I went up to, and I remember going like, "What's this like straw shit?" Or like it just like melts in your finger. And they were like, "Get off that! Get the fuck off that!" And like, I thought it was just like some fucking, some like made wire wool type feeling or whatever.
Bro, I've seen on ropey jobs, I've seen people just smashing that shit out of asylum with sledgehammers, man. It's fucking mental. Like, it's just people, I guess people just didn't understand it. But anyway, look, to the point, I like the ambiguity around this film. I think horror really works when you have to engage with it and do some thinking. I think like all the worst horrors are horror movies where it's like, I can enjoy these for for their own reasons, but like there's no ambiguity about a Friday the 13th movie, right? There's no ambiguity. Jason's out there, he's killing people and they die, and then Jason gets got at the end. It's all text. There is no subtext. There's nothing to think about. There's no spin on it that you can realistically do. It just is what it is. It's a story. Movies like this are ultimately a story. You can go through it quite linearly, and it all works. But it's saying it's not massively deep, but it is saying more than it's saying in text. It has a very clear subtextual element to it, and ultimately the end of the story, how we arrive at that conclusion. You can have a choice how we got there. You can believe this is just a dude who just snapped and did all these atrocious things. You could believe the asylum itself is a malevolent force that takes over people and has a sort of sentience into itself. Or you can believe that there is a creature, a demon, or maybe not a demon, but something that can enter into people's bodies and cause them to do terrible things. And he likes to use the name Simon, the most unthreatening demon name I've ever heard. So
close
it's
to
entirely
Pyman,
up to you.
though. Close to Pyman in Hereditary.
Pyman has that kind of like medieval kind of overtone, so it's okay. And then obviously you've got fucking Pazuzu in fucking Exorcist 2.
Sure.
So that's a silly one as well. But I mean,
Pazuzu's very silly.
But like obviously this movie is it's one of those where it's like it's better than it's better than all of its parts. Like it shouldn't be as good and as thought-provoking as it is. This should be like, especially at the time it was made, this should have been a quick, let's do a Blair Witch style movie, see if it takes off. If people like the premise, if people like the twist, it'll make a lot of money. If they don't, it won't. And let's just knock it out there. Because we can shoot this in a few weeks. It's more than that. It isn't just another genre movie, and it's memorable for that reason. And I think it was a great test run for The Machinist, which I know a lot of people have seen that film, but that has a really almost dark. In that movie, the demon is guilt. That enters into your body and doesn't leave you. So some similar themes. But yeah, I really liked rewatching this movie. I definitely think it's is it scary in the sense it's gonna fucking like like shake you up. No, it's one of those movies that probably 2 days later you'll see something and you'll be thinking.
I prefer this, like in terms of jump scares or anything. I prefer the really ambiguous, lurking dread films, which is why I like Hereditary, Ari Aster's work. I really enjoyed the TV show Haunting of Hill House. That actually scared that fucked me up, man. That thing is actually very scary. But I'm more into that kind of like slow burn horror, so I did enjoy this as well.
It's your movie, Duncan. You do the final thought.
Yeah, I would just say this is one where one of the things I like the best is that I almost never ever meet anyone who's seen it or heard of it. And when I looked online, it's like there's a few people either really get it and really fuck with it, or they think it's just trash and there's nothing there. And it's just some fucking what the hell has not happened? And it's one of those ones where I will say I wish the people who don't like it just had a more coherent argument or some points, because it does come up. Like I've often mentioned this, my favorite film is The Prestige, and that's another film which actually a lot of people don't seem to get. And I've heard the worst critique ever, which is people say it doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, I think that script should be like in the fucking Smithsonian or something. It is unbelievable how well crafted and fit together that is. And so if you don't get it, I'm sorry, at the end, I can't go, well, agree to disagree. Like, no, I will agree you are a fucking cretin. You don't understand the clues in the film. And I actually think, rewatching this, because another thing I've learned about this series is when you rewatch with a critical eye to make notes, you also just catch things you don't catch otherwise because you're engaging a different part of your brain. You're not suspending disbelief entirely. So when I rewatched it, even I found little like details, like I said, that I hadn't noticed that do hint at certain aspects and do foreshadow, but they foreshadow in a way where they're obviously, the first time you watch it, only supposed to be picked up by the subliminal, the subconscious. You're not going to actually the first time go, wait a minute, is that the same peanut butter? You're not going to do that. Like, that's what you're going to pick up the second and third time. But I tell you what, it's also a film, surprisingly for a horror film, it's got good replay value too. Wait 5 years till you've forgotten what all the dialogue is. Come back, you'll be able to watch this again, and maybe, like I said, depending on where you're at in life, maybe you'll even have a different perspective on the ending. Based.
All right. Well,
you know what was based? Just before you wrap it up, here's what was based. You starting coughing while we're talking about the movie with asbestos.
Yeah,
perfect.
exactly.
That was nailed.
It's
that
almost like
comedic
was
timing of yours.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that'll do it. Our first creepy deep cuts here for you for Halloween. We actually are doing back-to-back episodes. We're recording them now because these guys are doing an esports event next week.
Even the whole game away and everything. I know.
Yeah.
I was going to change t-shirts.
Oh, no. We don't need to do the suspension of disbelief.
Don't ruin the mistake.
It's like Jeopardy where you just bang out 10 of them in a day. You know what I mean?
Oh, God.
People where even though...
We game show now.
Even though at the end of the last episode of every arc, Monty says all 4 films. I like in the first 2 films, the comments is always like, oh, they can actually do like bloody Godfather 2 at the end. It's like, there's no chance. Like we've already agreed.
Yeah, we've already told you what the 4 films are.
We've probably even filmed all 4. Like by the time you see it, it's over. But, God bless. Go for it,
It depends. Sometimes we have 3 or 4 of these in advance, guys, before you even see them being released. So we actually are sometimes good at planning content, especially because we have complicated schedules. So we gotta double up sometimes. But I will say that I'm really glad. I actually think that on the days we have doubled up, we kind of get more out of it in a way because we've referenced Cure a lot, and we're about to record the Cure episode. And by the way, guys, I hadn't seen this movie. I think this movie's fucking amazing. I really enjoyed this one. So I would say absolutely go out of your way to watch Cure. And we'll see you next week and / in 5 minutes when we talk about it.